Welcome to Coffee with Kusari. I'm Ben Cotton, and today I'm here with Mike Lieberman, co-founder and CTO of Kusari. So, Mike, there's been a lot of chatter lately about people, verifying their open source contributors. What do you think about that?
There's been a lot of discussion over, especially the past few weeks, of what should we be doing about trusting the folks who are writing the code that makes up our software. And I think that sort of argument makes perfect sense if you are a company, for example, Kusari. Hey, do we trust that our employees are writing the right code, that our employees are not trying to do something nefarious behind the scenes? And so, are we validating that they are allowed to work here? Yes. Are we looking at paperwork? Absolutely. Are we checking identities? Sure. But I think the thing that when we look at it from the perspective of open source is all free. It's like somebody who shakes your hand on the street and you're like, okay, give me your ID. Before I communicate with you further, I need to make sure I know who you are. And it's like, it doesn't really make a whole lot of sense. There's no there's no reason for the person on the other side to even do any of that, right? In the context of, again, like Kusari, an organization, a company, there's an incentive for folks to give over their ID. Hey, there's laws around this. There is an exchange of compensation here, right? There's, hey, I am offering up my engineering services in exchange for you have some of this information. I also work for you, all sorts of stuff like that. And that same sort of thing doesn't exist for open source. And I think importantly, at least for me, is I don't think it necessarily needs to or should exist for open source, right? The code itself is open. Everything you would want to check is there in the code. Now, again, there's still certain things you just kind of want to know. Hey, is this person shady? Is this person whatever? Great. But as a consumer of the open source, you don't get to make that decision on whether or not another project should be checking up on those things.
Yeah, and I think Gia Tan is the canonical example here, right? But I don't remember seeing definitive proof that Gia Tan was the effort of a nation state actor. But if that is true, then certainly nations have been very good at forging identity documents for their nefarious activities for hundreds of years. So even in that kind of case, could you really have prevented Gia Tan by having GitHub pre-check?
Yeah. It's hard to say, right? When it comes to, if we take a step back, I think the challenge with some of this is the world didn't know. To me, it wasn't that Gia Tan or whoever this person actually was, whether it's a whole group of people or whatever. It wasn't that this person somehow was able to get into was somehow able to get into this into their was somehow able to maliciously manipulate this project. It was the fact that this project was somehow used by, relied on by so much stuff that OpenSSH could not exist without this. And people did not know that before Gia Tan, it was just one person, right? Just one person was working on that project, or at least maintaining it. And there was a thing that would happen a lot when I worked at the banks, where we would regularly look at various pieces of software that we would be ingesting. And this would also be the case for vendor software, not just open source. But we would go through third-party risk management, where we would look at all the pros and cons of pulling in this software. If it came from a small company where we felt like their insurance wasn't good enough or whatever, where, hey, if we use your software and we get compromised, we view that as a $10 million risk for us, right? And you're only charging X for your software, and your total market cap is only 10 million. So we'd have to put you out of business just to use your software if something went wrong. That is kind of, like, it's a reasonable calculation to make. And I feel like a lot of companies are not making that calculation for their open source software, where they're not going through and realizing, oh, geez, a lot of this software is maintained by a single person. And also, when it comes to all open source software, right, this software in no way has any sort of, for free service agreement. You know what I mean? Like the maintainers of these projects could stop working on them. They could disappear. They could have other things going on. How many of us have had other, sort of side projects that just, hey, they go to the wayside, and then somebody, you go up on GitHub and you find out that somebody opened up an issue like 3 weeks ago and says, hey, what's the status of this? And you're like, I haven't looked at this in 2 months. Yep. Those sorts of things are all there. And so it's a swamp of stuff.
Yeah. And like, one thing that I was thinking about is, if we start pushing open source developers to provide, some sort of confirmation of their legal, identity, we're basically just kind of saying no more volunteer open source. Because there's going to be a lot of people who, for privacy reasons, or just because like, hey, I'm willing to do this for a company that's paying me money, but not for my hobby project, or even a more than hobby, but, nobody's paying me for this. So,
Yeah. I mean, I think, again, when it comes to sort of, if I'm releasing a thing commercially, selling it or using it as, hey, even I would say Kusari open source projects, the ones that, not even the ones that, fall underneath the Linux Foundation and OpenSSF, ones like Guac, things that we ourselves are putting out there, I can see holding a higher bar there because, hey, we are a commercial entity. There should be an expectation that if we are pulling these things in, there should be, we should be doing some level of due diligence, right? We are, and the same thing goes with the Linux Foundation itself, right? They are taking on a lot of liability, pulling in all these projects. They get member dues, yada, yada. And I would sort of like separate those sorts of projects where I do think that there is value in some of this stuff. Because like, look at, for example, the Linux kernel. The Linux kernel had to kick off certain people out of the maintainers list because of they were on, they came from countries that were on sanctions lists. And so there are things like that I totally see there being value there. But, hey, Mike working on his like, even if it's a super cool library, that a lot of folks love, you can't require me to do something. Like I, as you mentioned, like I could just kind of say, yeah, I'm fine, I abandoned the project. But in addition to that, I think, even though nobody's requiring it, I think also still the pressure can be impactful to open source developers, because there's been many a horror story that's kind of come out there over the years of somebody coming out and saying, oh yeah, I stopped working on this because I got a cease and desist from insert enterprise name, that, or some organization asked me when a certain vulnerability was gonna be fixed, and they sent it via like legal letterhead, and it came from a law firm, and I was super worried, like, am I going to be sued, even though in almost all cases there would probably be no case there. It clearly is something that is concerning for the average sort of hobbyist who's just like, I'm just looking to write some code. As soon as I start getting legal threats, even just thinking about it, like thinking about those legal threats is a burden on me. So I'm just going to abandon the project. And I think that's, to me, is scary. And I hope we kind of do more to tell developers that nobody is coming for you. And maybe there should be more organizations that can help out with that sort of problem of, hey, somebody who's ignorant of how open source works comes in and says, I'm gonna, send a threatening legal letter because we were compromised by their open source project. It's like, no, you weren't. You were compromised by your own incompetence, right? For not checking that the open source code fit what your specific needs were.
So, for companies that are consuming open source software and, would like to have this, level of trust, what should they be doing if they can't ask for a driver's license?
So I think there's two main things. So let me first start off with hey, if I don't want to do a whole lot, what can I be doing, right? Well, you could look at organizations like the Linux Foundation, right? Organizations like OWASP, Eclipse, Apache Foundation. Yes, they are still giving, all their projects are still, no warranty, yada, yada, Apache 2.0 license, MIT license, GPL, that kind of thing, that sort of says, hey, no liability on the developers. But with that said, those organizations are still getting funding from various sources. They have resources to do the right things that even if they're not checking up on their individual contributors, which again, I think has varying utility just generally, especially in a non-commercial context. One of the things I think they could be doing, right, is they're probably scanning their code more often. They probably have the resources to have a security person on staff or have enough security expertise in the community to make sure that reasonable things are done in those projects. And then, so that's kind of like one thing where, hey, the Linux Foundation, even if, let's say, nobody could sue the Linux Foundation because of a breach or whatever, the Linux Foundation has a reputation at stake here, right? Myself here, I might have a reputation at stake if, let's say, I release something that has bad code, but it's very different compared to the Linux Foundation, where you're talking about you have the Linux kernel and you have Kubernetes and you have these other massive, massive projects that everybody involved wants to make sure of is seen as being reliable and secure. So that's one thing. And then the second thing is you could just scan the code, right? The code is free. The code is open. You can go in and build the code yourself. You can scan the code. You can run static analysis. You can have your own internal security engineers review the code. You can do all of these things. Now, with both of those things said, right, like you can go and just pull down the code and do all these things. What would be great is if those same organizations that are maybe worried about these things and maybe doing some of these scans, doing some of these audits themselves, if they shared the results of those audits publicly. And because it does feel like a lot of organizations want to have their cake and eat it too. It's like they want the community to do most of the work for them. And then everything that they are doing internally, they don't want to share, right? Because they're worried that if somebody knew that they were using Log4j, somebody can use that information. And it's like, let's be honest, if you're a bank, insurance company, some other multinational, you probably got Java and you're probably using Log4j. We know that, right? The world knows that already. And so we probably should be doing more to kind of figure some of that out and kind of, to sort of convince organizations to sort of contribute back, right? Again, we're not asking like everybody to be contributing bug fixes, but even just opening up an issue, right? A lot of a lot of enterprises actually discover security issues and don't contribute them back to the upstream projects because they're worried that somebody can track it back to them and track how they're somehow using this library or using this tool, and that could be used as a means to exploit them. And the thing about it is, like, the same way you're not sharing, there's a whole lot of malicious actors who are not sharing what they already know. They probably already know about that 0 day, and they're just waiting for the right time to pop it. And hey, you've now made it so that nobody else who's like just wasn't aware, wasn't using it in the same environment that you were, they don't know about that either. So I think like the more we can do to sort of incentivize organizations, the same organizations who are asking for, hey, can you give me your ID before you submit, source code? If we can incentivize them to be doing a bit more on bringing, collaboration together and in collaborating with the community, bringing sort of their perspectives, but also just opening up issues and that sort of stuff would be, pretty important there.
All right. Thanks for joining us, Mike. We'll see you all later.
All right. Thank you.